Super creative.
I definitely missed the boat on this one. It's been out for a while now. The Fujifilm X100V, the fifth of its name. Is it the perfect everyday carry, a street shooter's dream, a replacement for both your phone and DSLR? There's only one way to find out. Let's get super creative.
We can be reactive, or we can be creative. It all depends on how you choose to see.
I'm Rob Lyons, and this is Super Creative. So my disclaimer is that I don't have any affiliation with Fujifilm or its retailers. And I paid over full price for this camera, as it's nearly impossible to find in May of 2022. So I paid a premium because I just really wanted one. And on that note, I want to briefly touch on gear acquisition syndrome. I make videos about gear, I watch videos about gear, and I buy way too much gear. Case in point, you and I most likely don't need a new camera. We need to get out and take more photos. That is what it's all about. I got this tattoo to remind me to always see the value in what I already have. Moral of the story, don't buy a new camera. Okay, now that that is out of the way, let's talk about my new camera. Oh boy. I bought this camera because I just had my first child, and I want to be able to document family moments on something better than an iPhone and smaller than my full-frame setup. The X100V wasn't on my radar when it launched. Honestly, I haven't been paying enough attention to Fuji, except for maybe the GFX cameras, so I missed this until recently. I didn't know I needed, or more accurately wanted, this camera until I saw it. I'm a rangefinder guy, as you can see by the film rangefinders that I use regularly. So the compact rangefinder design language, it spoke to me in a soft and sultry whisper that made my ear warm and moist. Who writes this stuff?
You do?
I do? I can't even fire anybody. Roll the music. Okay, I went with black because it's a bit more low-key for street photography, especially in some of the sketchier streets that I like to shoot in. The silver looks really pretty, but I had to keep mine ninja. Let's talk about the build. It's good. How do I know? Because the first thing I did with this camera is drop it straight onto the concrete. It survived with a light scratch on its metal body, and here we are, alive and well, to tell the tale. A wrist or body strap is an absolute must with this little thing, especially if you have butterfingers, like yours truly. The rangefinder form factor, it's strong with this one, including its hybrid optical LCD viewfinder, which is a first for me, and I love it. There are tactile dials for aperture, shutter speed, exposure compensation, and ISO, and a couple extra dials thrown in that you can program. I added this soft shutter release so that you can actually twist the camera on, so now everything's pretty much a dial. Super rad. This camera is a bit smaller than I expected, which is a big positive in my book. Compact size is one of the main reasons I bought it. I end up holding it like a point and shoot or a cell phone because my hands are so big. So I may buy the hot shoe thumb accessory, most likely my next upgrade. The articulating screen, it's great. I wish it was fully articulating because I like to shoot low angle vertical shots, but I know that that would make the size bigger. Maybe see it on the next one if they can make it fit, but I also know a lot of photographers who hate those, so whatever. Design-wise, I'm giving it a 9 out of 10, not because I'm keeping score or grading it. I just felt that the design of this camera is very excellent, but I wanted to leave a little room for improvement. This camera, it's definitely a street shooter right down to the fixed 35mm f2 Fujinon lens, which is plenty sharp wide open. I have been doing a lot more street photography lately, especially at night and in the rain. So the fast f2 lens and the camera's weather sealing are main features for me. The lens isn't weather sealed until you add a screw-on filter, so I run a UV filter during the day, the only time I've ever actually used one of those. I don't like unnecessary filters, and at night I always use diffusion filters, so no issues there. In case you haven't noticed, this is a fixed 23mm lens or 35mm equivalent field of view on a full-frame sensor, and that happens to be my favorite focal length. I actually own several 35mm lenses at this point, and it really works for how I see the world and how I frame my scenes. I added this little Hogue lens hood on mine, one because it comes with the filter adapter that I needed, and two because I hoped it might keep a bit of the rain off the lens, and it works surprisingly well for it. I also used the filter hood combo to protect the lens, as I never put a lens cap on it, because I want it ready to go at all times. When you're shooting in the street, things happen, you got to be ready to shoot. No lens caps. I should mention that the lens flares are very well controlled on this lens, even without the hood. Better than most 35mm lenses I've used, and I point this directly at light sources all the time, so yeah, great performance on that front. And I have to talk about the flash on this camera. Haha, gotcha. It's actually awesome to add a little bit of fill light to faces. This camera actually has a leaf shutter built into the lens, so you can crank your shutter speed way up and get high speed sync. That's very usable on a sunny day. And on the opposite side of that, there is a 4-stop built-in ND filter to help knock down that light a little bit and keep your depth of field shallow and maybe do some slightly longer exposures. What else should we talk about? Video? No. I'm not going to use this camera for video because I have so many video cameras already. Good problem to have, I guess. I would use it in a pinch if I had to, with no qualms, but I do have several cameras that are actually better at video than this. I suppose if you're a Fuji shooter, that this would provide a second angle on a shoot. My main issues are the lack of in-body image stabilization, the fixed lens, and the fact that it has a 10-minute record limit. So it's not a video shooter's camera, and in case it's not obvious, this camera is also not geared towards sports, wildlife, event, or portrait photographers either, because of that fixed focal length and some of its other limitations. Moving right along, the battery life is pretty lackluster, but it's a small camera and small battery, so I end up carrying an extra one in my pocket, no biggie. On a typical photo walk, I have only used one battery so far. I've never pulled out the extra. So far, so good. There's also only one card slot, but it's not like I'm shooting weddings on this, so again, no biggie, it keeps the size of the camera small. Let's talk about the sensor. It's an X-Trans 4 26 megapixel APS-C sensor. And I'm new to Fuji, so this is all new to me as well. Basically, X-Trans is a different color matrix filter over the sensor than a typical CMOS camera. So that renders things just a little bit different. And I'm also a recent convert to the full frame. So backpedaling to APS-C, a bit worrying for me, but so far I've been super happy with the results from this camera, and I have the big boys when I need them. This little guy, it's for the times that I don't want to carry camera gear, which is actually pretty much all the time. I like to shoot handheld photos at night, and I have to say that I'm really happy with the low light performance. The grain is really fine on this camera and doesn't bother me at all. I actually don't noise reduce many of my night shots. I just don't feel like I need to. My A7R2's noise is definitely a lot more obnoxious than this, so good job Fujifilm. I am super impressed with X-Trans so far. Something else unique to Fuji that I've been hearing about for years and years is how their cameras render color. If you shoot JPEG, you can choose between a large selection of film simulations. Now, I've never really considered shooting JPEG in my entire career until now, and I have to say that for every single photo I've taken on this camera, I've shot a RAW plus a JPEG, and at least 50% of the time, I end up using the JPEG. I still shoot film, Fuji and Kodak film, and while the simulations aren't exactly right, I have to admit that there is something quite special about them. In my opinion, the straight-out-of-camera JPEGs are superior to shooting RAW and using presets in a lot of situations. You get different output for sure. You don't have to edit, and in that sense, the film simulations mimic shooting film in more ways than one. You can also pick a film simulation after the fact and convert the RAW to JPEG in camera or on your computer with the Fuji software. But I choose my film simulation based on my subject, just like I would with real film. Again, this camera is by far the closest experience I've had to shooting with film in a digital camera, both physically and aesthetically. You can also tweak the film sims quite a bit. I've tried quite a few of the recipes floating out there on the internet, and here's what's currently on my camera. Cinestill 800, one of my favorite films that I always keep in stock. Portrait Warm has that Wes Anderson kind of look to it. Basic, which is one I just change on the fly to adapt to certain situations. Kodachrome 64, the legend. Vision 3 250D, which I actually buy and shoot through my Leica all the time. Cineteal, which I haven't tried much but looks like something that I'd be into. Portra 400, which is fairly close to real Portra, as you see in this example. So I admit that I love playing with these film simulations. I think they look great. I also use these film simulations in the develop module of Lightroom. You can use them as camera profiles. Right now, Classic Chrome, my favorite, but Classic Negative is a very close second. So kudos to you, Fuji, for these film simulations. I would love it if they kept pushing this feature forward to mimic film in photo and video even more in the future. They have done something, I think, special here. I love these. These film simulations were actually a big reason I wanted to get my hands on a Fuji camera. I've never owned one before. I am so satisfied with what you can do with them. And playing with the recipes, it's a lot of fun. Honestly, I'm questioning how much film I'm going to shoot moving forward, especially with the way prices are right now. I may shoot out what I have left in my fridge and sell off my film gear while the prices are high and buy a GFX. We'll see. I know that sounds a bit crazy, but this camera, it feels like a hybrid film and digital camera in some ways. Just like I mentioned earlier, the tactile and thoughtful way you shoot film mixed with the versatility and improved technical performance of a digital camera. I still love the process of shooting real film, developing, scanning myself at home, but from a purely aesthetic perspective, I'm very satisfied with how my pictures look coming out of this little Fuji. And honestly, it changes everything for me. It has me contemplating what I want to shoot on moving forward. I probably need to try some more Fuji gear and possibly make some tough decisions. To conclude, I really wanted something small and light that I could bring everywhere to document life and do street photography in a low-key way. This checked those boxes for me. The design and the tactile nature of the camera, it's delightful. Every turn of a dial reminds me of shooting a real film camera, especially my old rangefinders. So does this hybrid viewfinder OVF. I think that's so cool. 26 megapixel APS-C sensor, good enough for my pixel peeping. I can put out a decent sized print, maybe crop a little. The flash is the best built-in flash I've ever used, actually usable. Weather sealing is a must for me, works great. Film sims, complete game changer from both a shooting and editing perspective. Lots of fun to play with. And I think that's the theme with this little camera, is that it makes photography fun. Gets out of my way when I'm not using it, and when I am. It's small, simple, versatile, and it puts out truly great images in all situations that I've used it in. The only negatives for me are the lack of the fully articulating screen, but I know that's just me. Lots of shooters would hate that, and I know you can't please everyone. The price is a bit steep. It is a great camera, quality sensor, quality lens, so not the end of the world, but I feel it's about $200 too expensive. However, the fact that I bought it for even more than retail and it's impossible to find it in stock anywhere means that Fuji has priced this absolutely perfectly, most likely. I'd also like to see a faster lens if possible on a future version, f1.7, 1.4, whatever's possible. And finally, the lack of IBIS ruins video and, it would be useful. But at the same time, if you added in all those features I just mentioned, it wouldn't be the camera that it is, would it? Nuh-uh. If you want a high-quality camera to document your life and the world around you, if you love the 35mm focal length as much as I do, and you like shooting rangefinder-style cameras, especially film, then I think that you're going to be really happy with this camera and especially enjoy the experience of shooting with it. If you have any questions about this camera, feel free to leave them below and I will answer them. I have no regrets with my purchase, and this is now officially my favorite camera of all time, taking the place of the Panasonic Lumix GX8. So I can easily recommend it to anyone who may be on the fence about it. That's gonna be a wrap. Remember, my friends, we can be reactive or we can be creative. It all depends on how you choose to see.
This has been a broadcast of the Super Creative Corporation. Super Creative. Woo!